The snow fell gently over the small town of Mapleton, Ohio, coating the streets in a pristine layer of white that sparkled under the Christmas lights. It was December 23rd, and the Williams family home stood proud on Maple Street, a two-story colonial with red brick and white shutters that had been in the family for 3 generations. Inside, the preparations for the annual Christmas gathering were in full swing, with the scent of cinnamon and pine filling every room. Eleanor Williams stood at the kitchen counter, her silver hair pinned back neatly as she rolled out pie dough with practiced precision. At 67 years old, she had hosted more Christmas dinners than she could count, and each one had to be perfect. Her daughter Sarah moved around the kitchen, pulling dishes from cabinets and checking the turkey in the oven. "Mom, Marcus said he'll be here around 4 tomorrow," Sarah said, glancing at her phone. "He's finishing up some work today so he can have the whole week off." Eleanor's hands paused momentarily on the rolling pin, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "That's fine, dear. I suppose he'll want to help with the decorations again this year." Sarah caught the edge in her mother's voice, but chose to ignore it, as she had learned to do over the past 5 years. "He loves decorating the tree with you, Mom. He says you have the best ornament collection he's ever seen." Eleanor returned to her pie crust, pressing perhaps a bit harder than necessary. "Your father used to say the same thing." The mention of Harold Williams, who had passed away 3 years ago from a heart attack, softened something in both women. Eleanor stopped her work and looked out the window at the snow, her eyes distant. "I miss him every day," she said quietly, "especially at Christmas." Sarah crossed the kitchen and wrapped an arm around her mother's shoulders. "I know, Mom. We all do. But Dad would want us to be happy. He would want us to celebrate together as a family." Eleanor nodded, but there was something unspoken hanging in the air between them, something that had been building for years, but neither woman was willing to address directly. It was the same tension that appeared whenever Marcus's name was mentioned, the same slight frown that crossed Eleanor's face when she saw her daughter's hand intertwined with her husband's dark fingers. The next morning, Christmas Eve, dawned clear and cold. Sarah woke early in the small apartment she shared with Marcus downtown, stretching beneath the warm covers before turning to look at her husband. Marcus Johnson lay sleeping beside her, his broad shoulders rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Even in sleep, there was a gentle strength about him that had drawn Sarah in from the moment they met at a medical conference 6 years ago. Marcus was an emergency room physician at Mapleton General Hospital, one of the best in the region. He had grown up in Detroit, the son of a schoolteacher and a factory worker, and had worked his way through medical school on scholarships and determination. When he and Sarah had started dating, she had known her mother would have concerns. What she hadn't expected was the cold resistance that had persisted even after their wedding, even after 5 years of marriage. "Hey, beautiful," Marcus murmured, his eyes fluttering open to meet hers. "Merry almost Christmas." Sarah smiled and leaned in to kiss him. "Merry almost Christmas. Are you ready for today?" Marcus's expression shifted slightly, a shadow passing behind his warm brown eyes. "I'm always ready to spend time with your family, Sarah. You know that." "I know my mother can be difficult sometimes," Sarah began. But Marcus shook his head. "Don't apologize for her. She's your mother, and she loves you. That's what matters." Sarah studied her husband's face, marveling as she often did at his patience and grace. In 5 years, she had never once heard him complain about her mother's coldness, her subtle snubs, her way of addressing everyone in the room except him. He simply absorbed it all with quiet dignity, deflecting with humor when he could and retreating into silence when he couldn't. "I love you," she said, "more than you know." "I love you too. Now let's get moving. I promised your mom I'd help hang the lights on the porch, and you know how she gets about her schedule." They arrived at the Williams house just after noon. their car loaded with gifts and the special sweet potato casserole that Marcus made every year. It was his grandmother's recipe, passed down through 3 generations of Johnson women, and it had become a quiet point of contention in the family. Eleanor had never once complimented the dish, though everyone else raved about it. Eleanor met them at the door, wearing her signature Christmas apron over a red sweater. Her smile was bright as she embraced Sarah, but it dimmed noticeably when she turned to Marcus. "Hello, Marcus. You can put those packages in the living room." "Good to see you too, Eleanor. Merry Christmas." Marcus's voice was warm despite the cool reception. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, a gesture she endured rather than welcomed. Sarah's younger brother David emerged from the den, a broad grin on his face. At 32, he was the baby of the family, a sports journalist who traveled the country covering college football. He grabbed Marcus in a bear hug, slapping his back enthusiastically. "There he is, the man who saved my life last Thanksgiving." Marcus laughed. "I told you, it was just the Heimlich maneuver. Any doctor would have done the same." "Any doctor wasn't there. You were. And that piece of turkey would have killed me if you hadn't been." David turned to his mother. "Mom, did you add Marcus to the prayer list at church like I asked? This man is literally a hero." Eleanor's smile was thin. "I mentioned it to Pastor Stevens. Now, David, can you help your sister bring in the rest of the packages?" As David and Sarah headed outside, Marcus stood alone in the foyer with his mother-in-law. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the words that had never been spoken. "The house looks beautiful," Marcus offered. "You've outdone yourself this year." Eleanor inspected a nearby ornament, adjusting its position on the tree. "We maintain our traditions in this family. Some things should never change." Marcus understood the subtext, as he always did. He was the change she hadn't wanted, the disruption to her carefully ordered world. But he refused to let her bitterness poison him. "Well, I'm grateful to be part of those traditions. Speaking of which, should I start on the porch lights? I noticed a few sections that might need replacing." "Do what you want. The ladder is in the garage." Eleanor swept past him into the kitchen without another word. Marcus stood for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then he squared his shoulders and headed for the garage, determined as always to kill her coldness with kindness. By late afternoon, the house was filled with the extended Williams family. Sarah's Aunt Patricia had arrived with her husband Tom, along with their 2 grown children and 3 grandchildren. Cousins filtered in and out, carrying dishes and gifts, while Christmas music played softly from the old stereo system that Harold had installed decades ago. Marcus had spent 2 hours on the porch, replacing faulty bulbs and securing loose strands of lights. When he finally came inside, his fingers numb from the cold. The house was warm and bright, the lights he had fixed twinkling cheerfully in the winter darkness. "Marcus, get over here!" David called from the living room, where he was watching football with Tom and the other men. "You're missing the game." Marcus smiled and started toward them, but Eleanor intercepted him in the hallway. "You're tracking snow through my house," she said, pointing at his boots. Marcus looked down. His boots were completely dry, having been on the warm porch for the past hour, but he simply nodded. "My apologies. I'll be more careful." He removed his boots at the door, walking in his socks to join the others. Sarah caught his eye from across the room, her expression a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. He winked at her, letting her know he was okay. The evening meal was served at the long dining table that had been in the Williams family since Eleanor's grandmother's time. Harold had always sat at the head of the table, and since his death, his chair had remained empty, a silent tribute to his memory. Eleanor sat at the opposite end, presiding over the meal with the practiced authority of a matriarch. "Before we begin," Eleanor announced, "I'd like us all to join hands for the blessing." Everyone reached for their neighbors' hands. Marcus was seated between Sarah and David, and he felt both of them squeeze his fingers reassuringly as the family bowed their heads. Your Heavenly Father, we thank you for this food and for bringing our family together on this blessed night. We remember those who are no longer with us, especially my beloved Harold, who built this family on faith and tradition. Help us to honor his memory by upholding the values he held dear. In Jesus' name, amen. As the food was passed around the table, conversation flowed easily. Patricia talked about her recent trip to Florida, while Tom debated college football rankings with David. The grandchildren giggled at the kids' table, and the house was filled with the warmth and noise of family. Marcus served himself some of his grandmother's sweet potato casserole, noting that it had been placed at the far end of the table, nearly hidden behind the larger dishes. He said nothing, simply enjoying the meal and contributing to conversations when included. So, Marcus, Patricia said, turning to him with genuine interest, David tells us you've been working extra shifts at the hospital. That must be exhausting during the holidays. The ER doesn't take vacations, Marcus replied with a smile. But I don't mind. Helping people is why I became a doctor. He's being modest, Sarah interjected proudly. Last month, he saved a little girl who came in after a car accident. The parents still send us thank you cards. That's wonderful, Patricia said warmly. You must feel so fulfilled by your work. Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor spoke up from her end of the table. It must pay well too. Emergency medicine is quite lucrative, isn't it? The table went quiet. There was an edge to Eleanor's question that everyone recognized, but no one knew how to address. Marcus met her gaze steadily. It's a demanding field with compensation to match, but I didn't choose it for the money. Of course not, Eleanor said, her tone suggesting the opposite. It's just that it must be nice, coming from where you came from, to have achieved so much. Sarah's face flushed red. Mum, what is that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, dear. I'm simply acknowledging Marcus's accomplishments. Isn't that what we're all supposed to do? The tension at the table was palpable. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Patricia studied her plate intently. The grandchildren, oblivious to the adult drama, continued their chatter at the kids' table. Marcus placed his hand over Sarah's, calming her before she could respond further. I appreciate that, Eleanor. I'm proud of where I come from and what I've achieved. Both have made me who I am. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing more. The conversation gradually resumed, though the warmth had seeped out of the room like heat escaping through a crack in the window. After dinner, the family gathered in the living room for their traditional Christmas Eve gift exchange. The children tore into their presents with wild abandon, while the adults took turns opening gifts and expressing appreciation. Sarah handed Marcus a small wrapped box. This is from me. Merry Christmas, honey. Marcus unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a beautiful gold watch with an engraving on the back. He read the inscription aloud. My heart, my home, my forever. His eyes glistened as he looked at his wife. It's perfect, thank you. He leaned in to kiss her, but Eleanor's voice cut through the moment. Perhaps we could save the displays of affection for private moments. There are children present. Sarah pulled back, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Across the room, David and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one had ever criticized other family members for showing affection before. Marcus took a deep breath, then reached into his jacket pocket. I have something for you, Eleanor. I know things between us haven't always been easy, but I hope this shows my respect for you and what you mean to this family. He handed her a small wrapped package. Eleanor accepted it with obvious reluctance, unwrapping it slowly to reveal a delicate antique brooch, silver with small pearls arranged in a floral pattern. This belonged to my grandmother, Marcus explained. It's been in my family for 4 generations. She gave it to me when she passed, and she told me to give it to someone who meant a great deal to me. I'd like you to have it." For a moment, something flickered in Eleanor's eyes. She looked at the brooch, then at Marcus, and for just an instant her mask slipped. But then she set the brooch aside, placing it on the side table without comment. "That's very thoughtful. Thank you." The dismissal was clear. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but Marcus simply nodded, his expression unchanged. "You're welcome. I hope it brings you as much joy as it brought my grandmother." The rest of the gift exchange passed in a haze of forced cheerfulness. When the last present had been opened, the family began to disperse, some heading to the kitchen for leftovers, others settling in front of the television. Marcus stood and stretched. "I think I'll step outside for some air. It's been a long day." Sarah started to rise, but he waved her back. "Stay with your family. I just need a few minutes." He grabbed his coat and stepped onto the back porch, the cold air hitting his face like a slap. The backyard was covered in snow, the old oak tree that Harold had planted decades ago standing sentinel in the darkness. Marcus leaned against the railing and looked up at the stars, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability he could never show inside. He had known what he was getting into when he married Sarah. She had warned him about her mother, about the resistance he would face. But he had believed that time and patience would win Eleanor over, that his love for her daughter and his commitment to the family would eventually break through her walls. 5 years later, he was still waiting. The door opened behind him, and David stepped out, 2 beers in hand. "Figured you could use one of these." Marcus accepted the bottle gratefully. "Thanks, man." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their breath fog in the cold air. "I'm sorry about my mom," David said finally. "She's not a bad person. She's just stuck in her ways," Marcus finished. "I know, and I don't hold it against her. Change is hard, especially for people her age." David shook his head. "That's more grace than she deserves. She treats you like garbage, Marcus, and you just take it, year after year. What's my alternative? Making a scene? Driving a wedge between Sarah and her mother? That's not who I am, David, and it's not what Sarah needs. But what about what you need? Don't you ever get tired of being the bigger person?" Marcus took a long sip of his beer, considering the question. "Every day. But I made a promise when I married Sarah. I promised to love her and honor her family. Your mother is part of that family, whether she accepts me or not." David was quiet for a moment. "You know, my dad used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching. I think he would have liked you, Marcus. I think he would have been proud to call you his son." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "That means more than you know." They finished their beers in the cold darkness, 2 men united by circumstance and strengthened by respect. When they finally went back inside, Marcus felt a little lighter, a little more prepared to face whatever the next day would bring. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold, the sun reflecting off the snow with almost blinding intensity. The Williams house stirred slowly to life, with various family members emerging from bedrooms and the fold-out couch in the den, seeking coffee and warmth. Marcus had been up since 6, unable to sleep. He had quietly dressed and gone for a run through the empty streets, needing to clear his head before the day's festivities began. By the time the rest of the family started waking, he had showered, dressed, and was helping prepare breakfast in the kitchen. Eleanor was already there when he arrived, cracking eggs into a bowl with mechanical precision. "Good morning," Marcus said, keeping his voice light. "Merry Christmas. Can I help with anything?" Eleanor glanced at him, then back at her eggs. "You can make the coffee. The machine is on the counter." It was a small concession, but Marcus accepted it gratefully. He busied himself with the coffee maker, filling the kitchen with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Other family members gradually filtered in, drawn by the smells and the promise of breakfast. Sarah found Marcus at the counter, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Merry Christmas, husband. Did you sleep okay?" "Like a rock," he lied. "You? Better with you beside me." She lowered her voice. "I'm sorry about last night. My mother was completely out of line." "It's fine, Sarah. Really, let's just focus on enjoying the day." Sarah studied his face, seeing the exhaustion behind his smile, the strain of maintaining his composure under constant assault. But she knew better than to push. Marcus processed things in his own way, in his own time. Breakfast was a lively affair, with the children excited about their new toys and the adults comparing notes on their gifts. The mood was festive, helped by the absence of any pointed comments from Eleanor, who seemed focused on ensuring the meal went smoothly. After breakfast, the family gathered in the living room for the main event. Opening the presents that Santa had left under the tree, the children squealed with delight as they discovered their gifts, while the adults captured the moments on phones and cameras. Marcus sat with Sarah on the love seat, watching the chaos with genuine enjoyment. Despite everything, he loved this family. He loved the noise and the laughter, the traditions and the history. He loved seeing Sarah so happy, surrounded by the people who had shaped her. "Okay, one more present," announced Patricia, pulling a large box from behind the tree. "This one is for Eleanor, from all of us." The family gathered around as Eleanor opened the box, revealing a beautiful cashmere shawl in her favorite shade of burgundy. She held it up, clearly pleased. "This is lovely. Thank you all so much." As she tried on the shawl, Marcus felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. The hospital. "Excuse me," he murmured to Sarah. "I need to take this." He stepped into the hallway, answering the call in a low voice. "This is Dr. Johnson." "Marcus, it's Janet. We've got a situation." Janet was the head nurse in the ER, a veteran of 30 years who never called unless it was serious. "What's going on?" "Multi-car pile-up on the interstate. We're getting slammed, and Dr. Patterson called in sick. We need you." Marcus closed his eyes. It was Christmas Day. He was supposed to have the day off, but people were hurt, and they needed help. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call and turned to find Sarah standing behind him, her expression already knowing. "The hospital? There was a big accident. They need me." Sarah nodded, disappointment flickering across her face before she composed herself. "Of course. Go save some lives." Marcus pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry. I'll get back as soon as I can." "I know you will. Be safe." He kissed her, then went to gather his things. When he passed through the living room, Eleanor looked up from her shawl. "Leaving already? The party's just getting started." "There's been an emergency at the hospital. I have to go." "On Christmas Day?" Eleanor's tone dripped with skepticism. "How convenient." Sarah's face reddened with anger, but Marcus simply smiled. "Lives don't wait for holidays. I'll be back as soon as I can. Merry Christmas, everyone." He was out the door before anyone could respond, the cold air hitting his face as he hurried to his car. He didn't look back. The ER was chaos when Marcus arrived. Ambulances lined the entrance, and the waiting room was filled with worried families. Marcus changed into his scrubs and hit the ground running, moving from patient to patient with practiced efficiency. The hours blurred together in a haze of blood and beeping monitors, of desperate questions and difficult decisions. There were victories and losses, lives saved and lives that slipped away despite every effort. Marcus worked through all of it, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he had. By the time his shift ended, it was nearly midnight. The hospital had quieted, the worst of the crisis passed. Marcus sat in the break room, too exhausted to move, staring at the vending machine without really seeing it. Janet found him there, a cup of coffee in her hand. "You did good work today, Marcus. We couldn't have handled it without you." "Just doing my job." "No." Janet sat down across from him. "You went above and beyond. As always, I don't know how you do it. Marcus thought of Eleanor's skeptical face, her insinuation that his call was somehow fabricated. He thought of all the Christmases he had sacrificed, all the holidays spent in the ER instead of with his family. "Someone has to," he said simply. Janet studied him for a moment. "You look tired, and I don't mean just physically. Is everything okay at home?" Marcus considered deflecting, as he usually did, but something about Janet's kind eyes and the late hour loosened his tongue. "My mother-in-law doesn't exactly approve of me. It's been 5 years, and she still looks at me like I'm something stuck to her shoe." Janet nodded slowly. "Is it a race thing?" "She's never said it outright, but yeah, I think so. Or maybe not just that. Maybe I'm just not the son-in-law she pictured for her daughter. And what does your wife say?" "Sarah's caught in the middle. She loves her mother and she loves me. She doesn't know how to fix it, so she tries to smooth things over." "And you? What do you do?" Marcus laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I turn the other cheek, again and again. I keep hoping that eventually she'll see me for who I am, not what she thinks I am." "And if she never does?" The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Marcus didn't have an answer. Back at the Williams house, the day had continued without Marcus. The family ate a lavish Christmas dinner, exchanged more gifts, and watched classic movies on television. But there was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before, a sense that something was off. Sarah checked her phone constantly, waiting for updates from Marcus. Each time she did, Eleanor made a small sound of disapproval. "I'm sure he's fine, dear. There's no need to hover. He's my husband, Mum. I worry about him. I'm sure his patients appreciate his dedication, though one might wonder if he'd rather be at the hospital than here with us." Sarah's patience, already stretched thin, finally snapped. "What is that supposed to mean?" The living room went quiet. David reached for the remote, muting the television. Patricia and Tom exchanged nervous glances. "Nothing at all," Eleanor said smoothly. "I'm simply making an observation." "No, you're making an accusation, and I'm tired of it, Mom. I'm tired of the comments, the looks, the way you treat Marcus like he's not good enough." "Sarah, this isn't the time or place." "Then when is? It's been 5 years, 5 years of holidays just like this, where you make my husband feel like an outsider in our own family. What do I have to do to make you accept him?" Eleanor's face hardened. "Accept him? I've been nothing but polite to that man." "Polite isn't acceptance. You barely look at him. You never compliment his cooking, even though everyone loves it. You put his grandmother's brooch aside like it was a piece of junk. You are cold to him every single day, and he takes it without complaint because he loves me. But I see it, Mom. I see how much it hurts him. Perhaps if he weren't so sensitive. Sensitive. He's the least sensitive person I know. He deals with life and death every day at work, and he still comes home with a smile on his face. He puts up with your treatment because he doesn't want to cause problems between us. But I'm done, Mom. I'm done pretending everything is fine." Eleanor stood, her face flushed with anger. "If you're so unhappy with how I run my home, perhaps you should spend Christmas elsewhere. Maybe we will." "Sarah, Mom, stop." David stepped between them, his hands raised. "This is Christmas. Dad wouldn't want us fighting like this." "Don't you dare bring your father into this," Eleanor snapped. "Your father understood the importance of tradition and family values. And Marcus doesn't. He's not." Eleanor struggled to find words that wouldn't damn her. "He's different." "Different how, Mom?" Sarah's voice was ice. "Different because he's black? Is that what this is about?" The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Eleanor's face went pale, then red. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing? I am not a racist." "Then why, Mom? Why can't you accept him? He's kind, he's successful, he adores me. He's everything you should want for your daughter. So why?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because he took you away from us. Because you moved to that apartment downtown instead of staying close. Because you spend holidays torn between two families instead of just being with us. Because when I look at him, I see the future where you choose his family over ours. Sarah felt the anger drain out of her, replaced by a sadness she hadn't expected. Mom, that's not how it works. Loving Marcus doesn't mean loving you less. There's room in my heart for everyone. Is there? Because lately it feels like I'm losing you. First your father, now you. You're not losing me. I'm right here. I've always been right here. The two women stood facing each other, years of unspoken pain finally surfacing. Patricia moved to Eleanor's side, taking her hand. Ellie, sweetheart, maybe we should sit down and talk about this calmly. I don't want to talk. I want things to be the way they were. But they can't be, Mom. Sarah's voice was gentle now. Dad is gone. I'm married. Things change. But that doesn't mean we lose each other, unless you push us away. Eleanor looked at her daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. She saw the woman Sarah had become, strong, compassionate, fiercely loyal, so much like her father. I don't know how to do this, Eleanor admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know how to let go of what was and accept what is. You start by trying, one day at a time, and you start by giving Marcus a real chance. Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. Marcus stood in the doorway, still in his hospital scrubs under his winter coat, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Sorry I'm so late, he said, unaware of the conversation he'd interrupted. It was a rough day, but we saved most of them. Sarah rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You're back, thank God. Marcus held her, sensing the tension in the room. He looked over her shoulder at Eleanor, at her red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. Is everything okay? Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she turned and fled upstairs, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Marcus looked at Sarah questioningly. What happened? We had a talk. A long overdue talk. I think things might change, or they'll get worse. I'm not sure which. Marcus sighed, pulling Sarah closer. I never wanted to come between you and your mother. You didn't. She's been building this wall for years, and it finally came crashing down. Now we just have to see what's left when the dust settles. The rest of the evening was subdued. The family finished their Christmas celebrations with forced cheer, avoiding the topic that had exploded earlier. Marcus showered and changed, joining them for the last few hours of the holiday, though he noticed Eleanor didn't come back downstairs. By the time the family began to disperse, heading back to their own homes and their own lives, the Williams house felt different. Something had shifted, though no one was quite sure if it was for better or worse. Sarah and Marcus were among the last to leave. As they gathered their things in the entryway, David pulled Marcus aside. Hey, man, I just wanted to say, whatever happens with my mom, you've always got a place in this family. With me, at least. Marcus clasped his hand, genuinely moved. That means a lot, David. Thank you. And don't give up on her, okay? I know she's difficult, but there's a good person in there somewhere. She just needs help finding her way back. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. 5 years was a long time to wait for someone to change. The drive home was quiet, both Sarah and Marcus lost in their own thoughts. When they finally reached their apartment, they collapsed onto the couch together, too tired to make it to the bedroom. What a day, Sarah murmured, her head resting on Marcus's chest. Yeah. Marcus stared at the ceiling, his mind still processing everything. Sarah, can I ask you something? Anything. If you had to choose between me and your mother, what would you do? Sarah lifted her head, looking at him with fierce intensity. I would never have to make that choice, because my mother is going to come around. I'll make sure of it. And if she doesn't, then she'll have made the choice for herself. By pushing you away, she pushes me away too. We're a package deal, Marcus. You knew that when you married me. I did. I just don't want to be the reason you lose your family. Sarah reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. You could never be that reason. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Marcus Johnson. And eventually my mother will see that too. They fell asleep on the couch, still in their clothes, holding each other against the uncertainty of the future. The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange limbo. Sarah called her mother several times, but the conversations were strained and brief. Eleanor was polite but distant, as if she was processing the confrontation and hadn't yet decided how to respond. Marcus threw himself into work, taking extra shifts at the hospital. He told himself it was because they were short-staffed, which was true. But he also knew he was avoiding the inevitable. Another interaction with Eleanor, another exercise in patience and rejection. New Year's Eve arrived with a sense of forced optimism. Sarah had convinced Marcus to attend her mother's annual party, arguing that they needed to show a united front. Marcus had agreed reluctantly, knowing that avoiding the situation would only make things worse. When they arrived at the Williams house, the party was already in full swing. Friends and neighbors filled the rooms, drinking champagne and counting down to midnight. Eleanor played the perfect hostess, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile never wavering. When she saw Sarah and Marcus enter, something flickered in her eyes, but she composed herself quickly, approaching them with a glass of champagne in each hand. "Sarah, Marcus, I'm glad you could make it." Sarah accepted the glass with cautious hope. "Thanks, Mom. The house looks beautiful. It's the same as every year." Eleanor turned to Marcus, her expression unreadable. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course." He followed Eleanor through the crowd into Harold's old study at the back of the house. The room had been left largely untouched since his death, still filled with his books and his favorite chair and the faint scent of his pipe tobacco. Eleanor closed the door behind them, then stood facing the window, her back to Marcus. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Marcus waited, not trusting himself to speak. "I've spent 5 years making you feel unwelcome in this family. I've been cold and dismissive and cruel, and you never once retaliated. You never once gave me the fight I was looking for." She turned to face him, and Marcus was shocked to see tears streaming down her cheeks. "I wanted you to be the villain, Marcus. I wanted you to give me a reason to hate you, to justify my resistance, but you never did. You just kept being kind, kept being patient, kept loving my daughter with everything you had. And I hated you for it. Because it forced me to look at myself, at my own prejudice, at the ugly thing I was becoming. Eleanor, let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath. "When Harold died, I lost my anchor. He was the one who kept me steady, who challenged me when I was wrong, who loved me despite my flaws. Without him, I've been lost, and instead of dealing with that loss, I've been taking it out on you, blaming you for changes that would have happened anyway. Using you as a scapegoat for my own fear and grief." She stepped closer, reaching out to take his hands. Her grip was trembling but firm. "I can't promise I'll be perfect. I've spent 67 years becoming the person I am, and I can't change overnight. But I can promise to try, to really try, because Sarah loves you, and I love Sarah, and I don't want to lose her. I don't want to lose either of you." Marcus felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crack. 5 years of patience, of turning the other cheek, of hoping for a moment exactly like this one. "I never wanted to take Sarah away from you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I wanted to add to her family, not subtract. I wanted to be the son you never had, if you would let me." Eleanor's face crumpled. "I know. I know that now, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Without thinking, Marcus pulled her into a hug. She stiffened at first, unused to physical affection from him. But then she relaxed, leaning into the embrace, letting out years of tension in a single, shuddering breath. "Welcome to the family, Marcus," she whispered. "For real this time." When they emerged from the study, the party was still going strong. Sarah spotted them immediately, her eyes widening at the sight of her mother and husband walking side by side, their expressions soft and open. "What happened?" she asked, rushing to meet them. "We had a talk," Eleanor said, reaching out to take her daughter's hand. "A long overdue talk." Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly. "I think things are going to be different now. Different good or different bad?" "Different good," Eleanor said, and there was a warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I have a lot of making up to do, Sarah, to both of you, but I'm ready to start, if you'll let me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Of course, Mom. That's all I've ever wanted." The three of them stood together in the crowded room, a family finally united. The clock struck midnight, and all around them people cheered and embraced, welcoming the new year with hope and celebration. Marcus looked at his wife, at his mother-in-law, at the future stretching out before them. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to believe that everything would be okay. The new year brought changes that no one had anticipated. Eleanor made good on her promise, reaching out to Marcus with a consistency that surprised everyone, including herself. She called him regularly, asking about his work and his life, listening with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. For his part, Marcus remained cautiously optimistic. He appreciated Eleanor's efforts, but years of rejection had made him wary. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Their relationship was put to the test in February, when Eleanor was diagnosed with heart disease. The same condition that had taken Harold 3 years earlier was now threatening to take her too. The family gathered at the hospital, shocked and frightened. Sarah held her mother's hand while the doctors explained the situation. Eleanor needed surgery, and soon. Her heart was failing, and without intervention, she had months to live at best. "We can schedule the operation for next week," the cardiologist said. "It's risky, but it's her best chance." Eleanor, pale and exhausted, looked at her daughter. "I'm not sure I'm ready, sweetheart. This is how your father went." "No, Mom. Dad didn't have the surgery. He refused treatment because he was stubborn and proud. You're going to fight this." "What if I don't survive? What if I go under and never wake up?" Sarah's voice broke. "Then I'll be right here when you do." "And so will Marcus." Eleanor turned to her son-in-law, who stood quietly at the foot of her bed. "You'll take care of her, if something happens to me?" "With everything I have," Marcus promised. "But nothing's going to happen. You've got the best medical team in the state. You're just saying that because you're part of it." Despite the gravity of the situation, Marcus smiled. "Well, that too." The surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. In the days leading up to it, Eleanor put her affairs in order, writing letters to each family member and making peace with old grudges. But her conversations with Marcus were different, lighter, easier, as if the threat of death had finally stripped away all pretense. "I never told you about my grandmother," Eleanor said one afternoon as Marcus sat beside her bed reviewing her chart. "She was a remarkable woman, born in Mississippi in 1910, lived through things I can't even imagine. She moved north during the Great Migration, settled in Ohio, raised a family, despite everything working against her." Marcus looked up, surprised by the direction of the conversation. "She sounds like an incredible person." She was. And she would have liked you, Marcus. She had a way of seeing people for who they really were, not what they looked like. I wish I had inherited more of that from her. It's never too late to learn. Eleanor nodded slowly. No, I suppose it isn't. The morning of the surgery, the family gathered in the waiting room, a sea of anxious faces and clenched hands. Sarah paced the floor, unable to sit still, while David sat with his head bowed, praying silently. Marcus had wanted to be in the operating room, but hospital policy prevented him from participating in procedures involving family members. Instead, he sat with Sarah, holding her hand, offering what comfort he could. "She's going to be fine," he said, for what felt like the 100th time. "Dr. Reeves is the best cardiac surgeon in the region. What if she's not? What if this is the last time I see her? Then at least you had these last few weeks. At least you got to say what needed to be said." Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. "Thank you, Marcus, for forgiving her another chance. Thank your mother. She's the one who reached out. She's the one who changed." "But you met her halfway. You didn't have to do that, not after how she treated you." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother used to say that bitterness is a poison you drink hoping someone else will die. Holding on to anger at Eleanor wasn't hurting her. It was only hurting me, and more importantly, it was hurting you." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, seeing once again the incredible man she had married. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Now let's focus on positive thoughts. Your mother is going to pull through this, and we're going to have many more years of awkward family dinners together." Despite everything, Sarah laughed. "God, I hope so." The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting, of hoping, of praying. When Dr. Reeves finally emerged, still in her surgical scrubs, the family rose as one. "The procedure was successful," she announced, and a wave of relief swept through the room. "Mrs. Williams is in recovery. She'll need time to heal, but her prognosis is good." Sarah burst into tears, clutching Marcus's arm. "She made it. Oh my God, she made it." "I told you she would." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "She's tougher than she looks." The recovery was long and difficult. Eleanor spent a week in the hospital, then several months at home with limited activity. Sarah visited every day, helping with household tasks and keeping her mother company. Marcus came when his schedule allowed, bringing food and checking her vitals with professional precision. It was during one of these visits that Eleanor made a confession that would change everything. "I need to tell you something," she said, as Marcus checked her blood pressure. "Something I should have told you years ago." Marcus set down the monitor, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Eleanor hesitated, then reached for a folder on her nightstand. "After Harold died, I was in bad shape, not just emotionally but financially. Harold had handled everything, the bills, the investments, the mortgage. I had no idea where we stood until the lawyers started calling." She handed him the folder. Inside were bank statements, mortgage documents, collection notices. The numbers told a story of rapid decline, accounts depleted, credit cards maxed out, a house on the verge of foreclosure. "I didn't know what to do," Eleanor continued, her voice trembling. "I was too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to admit that I couldn't handle things on my own. I was about to lose everything when suddenly the debts started getting paid." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "Anonymous payments showing up every month, the mortgage, the credit cards, the utilities, all of it quietly taken care of. I didn't know who was doing it, and I was too grateful to question it, until last month." She pulled another document from the folder, a letter from the bank, thanking her for her final mortgage payment and confirming that the house was now fully owned. "I called them, asked for records of who had been making the payments. They said they couldn't tell me, but they accidentally included a routing number." She looked at Marcus with wide, tear-filled eyes. "It was your account, Marcus. It was you." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at the documents, his carefully maintained secret now exposed. "How long?" Eleanor whispered. How long have you been doing this? Since a month after Harold died. Marcus's voice was quiet, resigned. I saw the notices piling up on the kitchen counter when we visited. Sarah didn't notice, but I did. I knew you were too proud to accept help, so I did it anonymously. But the amount... We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know. Why? After how I treated you, why would you do this? Marcus finally looked up, meeting her eyes. Because you're Sarah's mother. Because despite everything, you raised an incredible woman who loves you more than anything. Because that's what family does. Eleanor broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I've been so horrible to you. For years, I've been cruel and dismissive, and you were saving my home. You were saving me. Eleanor! No, let me say this. I don't deserve your kindness. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But you gave it anyway, without expectation, without condition. And I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. She reached out, grasping his hand with surprising strength. You are the son I never had, Marcus Johnson. The son Harold would have been proud to call his own. And I am so sorry that it took me so long to see that. Marcus felt his own eyes sting with unshed tears, years of patience, of turning the other cheek, of hoping against hope. And now, finally, acceptance, real acceptance. I forgave you a long time ago, Eleanor. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself. When Sarah arrived an hour later, she found her mother and husband sitting together, their hands clasped, talking and laughing like old friends. The tension that had defined their relationship for so long was gone, replaced by something warmer and more authentic. "What's going on here?" Sarah asked, surprised and delighted by the scene. Eleanor looked at her daughter with shining eyes. "I was just getting to know my son-in-law, for real this time." Sarah looked at Marcus, who gave her a small smile and a slight nod. She didn't know the whole story yet, but she knew that something had shifted, something fundamental and permanent. "Well, don't let me interrupt," she said, settling into a chair beside them. "I've waited 5 years for this moment." The months that followed were transformative for the entire family. Eleanor recovered fully from her surgery, her heart stronger than it had been in years, but it was her relationship with Marcus that saw the most dramatic change. They developed a routine: Sunday dinners at the house, phone calls during the week, occasional lunches when their schedules aligned. Eleanor learned about Marcus's work, his childhood, his dreams for the future. Marcus learned about Eleanor's past, her fears, her regrets. They built a friendship brick by brick, laying a foundation that should have been built years earlier. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. At family gatherings, Eleanor made a point of including Marcus in conversations, asking for his opinion, listening to his stories. She praised his cooking, displayed his grandmother's brooch prominently on her dresser, and even started attending the predominantly black church where Marcus had been a member for years. "I can't believe the change in Mom," David remarked at Easter dinner, watching Eleanor laugh at one of Marcus's jokes. "It's like she's a different person." "She's not different," Sarah said, watching her mother with wonder. "She's just finally showing who she really is." The test came in the fall, when the anniversary of Harold's death arrived. It was always a difficult time for the family, a day of mourning and remembrance. But this year, Eleanor had a request. "I'd like Marcus to say a few words at the memorial service," she told Sarah, "about Harold, about family, about second chances." Sarah was stunned. "Mom, are you sure? That's usually reserved for family." "Marcus is family." Eleanor's voice was firm. "It's time we made that official." The memorial service was held at the church where Harold and Eleanor had been married 45 years earlier. The pews were filled with friends and family, all gathered to honor the memory of a man who had touched so many lives. When Marcus took the podium, there was a murmur of surprise from the older members of the congregation. but Eleanor sat in the front row, beaming with pride, and the murmurs quickly faded. "I never had the privilege of knowing Harold Williams," Marcus began. "By the time I entered this family, he had already passed. But I know him through the people he left behind, through David, who inherited his father's quick wit and generous spirit, through Sarah, who has Harold's determination and his capacity for love, and through Eleanor, who carries his legacy in everything she does." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Harold built a family on faith and tradition. He created a home where everyone was welcome, where love was given freely, and where second chances were always available. I know this because his family has extended those same gifts to me. He looked at Eleanor, his voice growing thick with emotion. "I wasn't always welcomed by everyone. Change is hard, and I represented a change that some weren't ready for. But this family, Harold's family, eventually opened their arms and let me in. And for that, I am eternally grateful." He stepped down from the podium, and Eleanor rose to embrace him in front of the entire congregation. The applause that followed was thunderous, a release of years of tension and a celebration of new beginnings. After the service, as the family gathered at the house for a meal, Patricia pulled Marcus aside. "I've never seen Eleanor so happy," she said. "You've brought something back to her that she lost when Harold died." "I didn't do anything," Marcus protested. "She did all the work." "You gave her a reason to try. That's more than you know." As the sun set over the Williams house, casting long shadows across the yard, Marcus stood at the window and watched his family, Sarah laughing with David, Eleanor directing the cleanup with gentle authority, children running through the rooms, filling the house with noise and life. This was what he had hoped for all those years ago when he first met Sarah. Not acceptance for its own sake, but genuine belonging. A family that saw him for who he was and loved him anyway. It had taken time and patience and more grace than he sometimes thought he had. But standing here now, surrounded by people he loved and who loved him in return, Marcus knew it had all been worth it. The winter holidays arrived with a sense of anticipation that the family hadn't felt in years. Eleanor had spent weeks planning the Christmas celebration, determined to make it special. "I want this to be different," she told Sarah during a planning session. "I want Marcus to feel truly welcome, not just tolerated, but celebrated." "He already does, Mom. He knows how much things have changed. But I want to show him. I want to make up for all the years I pushed him away." Sarah smiled, touching her mother's hand. "Then let's make this the best Christmas ever." The house was transformed for the occasion. Eleanor had ordered a special ornament with Marcus's name on it to hang alongside the family ornaments that dated back generations. She had requested his grandmother's sweet potato casserole recipe and planned to make it herself. And she had arranged for a family portrait, the first one that would include Marcus since the wedding. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow and a sense of magic in the air. The family gathered as they had every year, but this time the atmosphere was different, warmer, more inclusive, more like a family should be. Marcus arrived with Sarah, carrying a stack of presents and a bottle of wine. Eleanor met them at the door, embracing each of them in turn. "Merry Christmas, my dears. Come in, you'll catch your death out there." The evening unfolded like a dream. Marcus helped with the cooking, standing beside Eleanor in the kitchen as she attempted his grandmother's recipe. They laughed at her mistakes, celebrated her successes, and created new memories to replace the painful ones. At dinner, Eleanor insisted that Marcus say the blessing. He hesitated, surprised by the honor, but she took his hand and nodded encouragingly. "Heavenly Father," Marcus began, "we thank you for this food, for this family, and for the gift of second chances. We remember those who are no longer with us, and we honor their memory by loving each other well, Help us to continue growing, to continue forgiving, and to continue building a family that reflects your love. In Jesus' name, amen. When he opened his eyes, Eleanor was crying. But for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. The gift exchange that followed was full of surprises. Marcus received a watch that had belonged to Harold, engraved with a new inscription, "To my son with love." Sarah received her grandmother's engagement ring, passed down through generations, and now hers to wear. And the children received toys and books and all the treasures that make Christmas magical. But the biggest surprise came from Eleanor. "I have one more gift," she announced, reaching under the tree for a large envelope. "This is for Marcus." Marcus accepted the envelope, exchanging a puzzled look with Sarah. Inside was a legal document, dense with text and signatures. "What is this?" "Read it." Marcus scanned the document, his eyes widening as he understood its contents. "Eleanor, is this—" "I've added you to the deed of the house," she explained. "When I'm gone, this home will belong to you and Sarah equally. You've saved this house, Marcus. It's only right that it should be yours." The room went silent. David's jaw dropped. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, and Marcus stood frozen, the document trembling in his grip. "I can't accept this," he said finally. "It's too much. This house has been in your family for generations, and now you're part of that family." Eleanor rose, crossing to stand before him. "I was wrong about you, Marcus. I was wrong for so long, and I can never truly make up for the time we lost. But I can do this. I can give you something that shows just how much you mean to this family. To me." Marcus looked at the woman who had once been his adversary, who had questioned his motives and dismissed his efforts. She had changed so much, and yet the fierce determination in her eyes was the same. She was still Eleanor Williams, matriarch and guardian of her family's legacy. She was just finally including him in it. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "This means more than you know. I know exactly what it means." She reached up to touch his face, a gesture of tenderness that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "Welcome home, son." The applause that erupted was spontaneous and heartfelt. David clapped Marcus on the back. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. The children, sensing the emotion of the moment, stopped their playing to watch the adults embrace. And Sarah, standing beside the man she loved and the mother she had feared she might lose, felt something settle in her heart. Peace, real, lasting peace. The night continued in a blur of celebration. There was singing and laughter, stories and games. Marcus taught the children to play chess, while Eleanor watched with quiet pride. David and Patricia debated politics, while Sarah mediated. And through it all, the spirit of family filled every corner of the house. As midnight approached, the party began to wind down. Children were carried sleeping to their beds. Adults lingered over drinks, reluctant to end the evening. And Marcus found himself alone with Eleanor in the kitchen, drying dishes while she washed. "I'd never properly thanked you," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "For paying the bills, for saving the house." "You don't need to thank me. I did it for Sarah. You did it for all of us. And I want you to know that I see that now. I see everything you've done for this family." Marcus set down the dish towel, turning to face her. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What changed? After your surgery, I mean. What made you finally accept me?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I think it was facing death. Lying on that operating table knowing I might not wake up. It clarifies things. All the petty grievances, all the prejudices I had clung to, they seemed so small in comparison to what really mattered." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "And I realized that I had been so busy holding on to the past that I was missing the present. Missing the chance to know an extraordinary man who had done nothing but love my daughter and protect my family. I'm not that extraordinary. Yes, you are. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. She reached out, squeezing his hand. Harold would have loved you, you know. He was a better man than me, quicker to accept, slower to judge. He would have seen your worth from the beginning. I wish I could have known him. You do know him. Through this house, through this family, through Sarah. He's here with us even now, and I like to think he's smiling, seeing us finally come together. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He had never expected this level of acceptance, this depth of connection. 5 years of patience had led to a moment he hadn't dared to imagine. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Thank you, Marcus, for not giving up on me. They finished the dishes in companionable silence, two people who had once been strangers finally becoming family. The years that followed were rich with change and growth. Sarah and Marcus had their first child, a daughter they named Hope, followed 2 years later by a son they named Harold after his great-grandfather. Eleanor doted on her grandchildren, filling the house with toys and laughter and the kind of unconditional love that only grandparents can provide. Marcus continued his work at the hospital, eventually becoming chief of emergency medicine. His reputation for compassion and excellence spread throughout the region, and he was frequently invited to speak at conferences and medical schools. Through it all, Eleanor cheered him on, attending his lectures and clipping articles about his achievements to display on her refrigerator. Their relationship deepened with time, evolving from awkward reconciliation to genuine friendship. Marcus became Eleanor's escort to church functions and community events. She became his sounding board for professional decisions and personal dilemmas. They developed inside jokes and shared memories, building a bond that rivaled any mother-son relationship. On Eleanor's 70th birthday, Marcus gave a toast that brought the room to tears. 10 years ago, I married the love of my life, and her mother wasn't sure about me. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She made that pretty clear, actually. But instead of fighting fire with fire, I decided to try something different. I decided to love her anyway. He turned to Eleanor, who was watching him with shining eyes. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the rejection felt too heavy to bear, but I kept going, because I believed that eventually she would see me for who I really was, and I was right. He raised his glass. To Eleanor Williams, the toughest mother-in-law in Ohio and the best grandmother our children could ever ask for, I'm proud to call you Mom. Eleanor rose from her seat, crossing the room to embrace him while the guests applauded. It was a moment of pure grace, a testament to what patience and forgiveness can accomplish. But life, as it often does, had one more test in store. The call came on a Tuesday evening. Marcus was finishing a late shift at the hospital when his phone buzzed with Sarah's number. "It's Mom," she said, her voice tight with fear. "She's fallen. The ambulance is taking her to the hospital now." Marcus was in his car before she finished speaking, racing through the darkened streets toward Mapleton General. By the time he arrived, Eleanor was already in surgery, her hip shattered from the fall, her body struggling against the trauma. The hours crawled by as Marcus paced the waiting room, unable to sit still. Sarah arrived with the children, their faces pale with worry. David flew in from Chicago, his flight delayed by bad weather. And through it all, they waited, hoping and praying for good news. It came near dawn when Dr. Reeves emerged from the operating room. "She's stable," she announced, and the family sagged with relief. But there were complications. Her heart went into arrhythmia during the surgery. "We managed to stabilize it, but at her age, with her history..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood. Eleanor spent the following weeks in the hospital, then months in a rehabilitation facility. Marcus visited every day, reading to her, playing chess, helping with her physical therapy. Sarah came with the children, filling her room with drawings and flowers and the sound of young voices. Slowly, painfully, Eleanor recovered. She regained the ability to walk, first with a walker, then with a cane. She regained her strength, her appetite, her sharp wit. But she had changed too. The brush with mortality had softened something in her, made her more reflective, more appreciative of every moment. "I was thinking about that first Christmas," she told Marcus one afternoon, as they sat together in her room at the rehabilitation center. "The one where I was so horrible to you. That was a long time ago. Not so long that I've forgotten. I made you feel unwelcome in my home, in my family, and you just took it, with more grace than I deserved. I understood where you were coming from. Change is hard. Stop making excuses for me." Her voice was firm but fond. "I was wrong, plain and simple, and I'm grateful every day that you gave me a second chance." She reached out, taking his hand. Her grip was weaker than it used to be, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "When I'm gone, I want you to know that I love you, Marcus, not just as Sarah's husband or Hope and Harold's father. I love you for who you are, for your kindness, your patience, your endless capacity for forgiveness. You've made this family better, and I'm proud to call you my son." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. 10 years of work, of waiting, of hoping, and now, finally, these words. "I love you too, Mom. I always have." They sat together in the quiet room, two people who had started as adversaries and ended as family. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Eleanor Williams passed away peacefully on a warm spring evening, surrounded by her family. She was 80 years old, and she died in the house that had been her home for 4 decades, in the bed she had shared with Harold for 30 years of marriage. Marcus was at her side when she took her last breath. He held her hand as her eyes fluttered closed, as her breathing slowed and finally stopped. And in those final moments, he saw a peace on her face that he had never seen before. The funeral was held at the church where Harold and Eleanor had been married, where their children had been baptized, where so many of life's milestones had been celebrated. The pews were filled with friends and family, all gathered to honor a woman who had lived a full and complicated life. Marcus delivered the eulogy, his voice steady despite the grief weighing on his heart. "Eleanor Williams was a force of nature," he began. "She was stubborn and opinionated, proud and sometimes difficult. She could make you feel 2 inches tall with a single look, and she never backed down from a fight." Laughter rippled through the congregation. But she was also loving and generous, loyal and brave. She stood by her convictions, even when they were unpopular. And when she realized she was wrong, she had the courage to change. He paused, looking out at the faces before him. Sarah in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks. David beside her, his arm around his sister. Hope and Harold, too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel the loss. Eleanor and I didn't have an easy start. She wasn't sure about me when I first came into her family, and she let me know it. For years, we circled each other like wary animals, neither willing to make the first move. He smiled at the memory. But then, something changed. She opened her heart, and she let me in. And what I found there was not the cold, disapproving woman I had expected. It was a mother who loved her children fiercely, a grandmother who would have done anything for her grandchildren, and eventually a friend who became one of the most important people in my life. His voice grew thick with emotion. "Eleanor taught me that people can change, that forgiveness is possible even after years of hurt, that family isn't just about blood, but about the bonds we choose to build. She took a chance on me, and I will be forever grateful." He looked at the casket, at the peaceful face of the woman who had once been his adversary. "Rest easy, Mom. You've earned it." After the service, the family gathered at the house for a reception. Friends and neighbors brought food and condolences, sharing memories of Eleanor and offering support to her loved ones. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself in Harold's old study, staring at the photo of the couple on their wedding day. They had been so young, so full of hope and possibility, and now they were together again, wherever that might be. "Dad?" He turned to find Hope standing in the doorway, her grandmother's eyes looking out from her young face. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you okay?" Marcus considered the question. He was sad, of course. Eleanor had become a true mother to him, and her loss left a hole in his heart. But he was also grateful. Grateful for the years they had shared, for the relationship they had built, for the family that surrounded him still. "I'm going to be okay," he said, opening his arms for his daughter. "We all are." Hope ran to him, burying her face in his chest. He held her tight, this child who represented everything good that had come from his patience and perseverance. Behind her, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her own face streaked with tears, but her smile warm. "There you are, David's looking for you, something about a toast." Marcus nodded, setting Hope down and taking her hand. Together, they walked back to join the family, to raise a glass to Eleanor's memory, to celebrate a life well lived and a legacy that would endure. The house on Maple Street would remain in the family, as Eleanor had wanted. Sarah and Marcus would bring their children there for holidays, would host gatherings in the spacious rooms, would tend the garden where Eleanor had spent so many peaceful hours. And on the wall in the living room, beside the photos of Harold and Eleanor, would hang a new picture, the whole family, together, united by love and grace and second chances. It was what Eleanor would have wanted. It was what they all deserved. 5 years after Eleanor's passing, the Williams-Johnson family gathered at the house on Maple Street for their annual Christmas celebration. The house was decorated with the same ornaments that had hung there for generations, including the one with Marcus's name that Eleanor had commissioned so many years ago. Sarah and Marcus's children had grown. Hope was 15 now, a brilliant student with her father's compassion and her grandmother's determination. Harold was 13, athletic and charming, with a quick wit that reminded everyone of his namesake. David had married a wonderful woman named Claire, and they had twin boys who idolized their cousins. Patricia had finally retired, spending her golden years traveling and doting on her grandchildren, and the house, once filled with tension and unspoken resentments, now overflowed with warmth and laughter and unconditional love. As the family gathered around the dinner table, Marcus looked at the empty chairs where Harold and Eleanor had once sat. Their absence was still felt, a bittersweet reminder of all that had been lost and all that remained. "Before we eat," he said, raising his glass, "I'd like to propose a toast to Harold and Eleanor Williams, who built this family on faith and tradition, and to second chances, which made it possible for all of us to be here together." "To second chances," the family echoed, glasses raised. As they ate and laughed and shared stories, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with rejection and pain and moments when he had wanted to give up. But he had persevered, and in the end, he had found something more valuable than acceptance. He had found a family, a real family, bound not just by blood but by choice, by love, by the decision to keep trying even when it seemed impossible. And as the snow fell gently outside, coating Maple Street in a pristine layer of white, Marcus knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Home, at last. The night wore on, filled with the traditions that the family had maintained for generations. The children performed a little Christmas play they had prepared, with Hope directing and Harold reluctantly playing the lead role. David challenged Marcus to a game of chess, which Marcus won after a hard-fought battle. And Sarah sat with Claire on the couch, the two sisters-in-law sharing stories and secrets like old friends. When the clock struck midnight, the family gathered around the tree for their traditional reading of the Christmas story. This year, it was Marcus's turn to read, his deep voice filling the room with the familiar words. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. As he read, Marcus thought about those words. No room at the inn. He knew what it felt like to be turned away, to be told you didn't belong. But he also knew what it felt like to finally find a place where you were welcome, where you were loved, where you were home. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. He looked up at his family, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the Christmas lights. Hope was leaning against her mother, eyes half closed with sleep. Harold was sitting on the floor, absently playing with one of the twins' toys. David had his arm around Claire, their boys piled in their laps. This was his flock. These were the people he'd been called to protect, to love, to guide. And he had never been more grateful. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. Good tidings of great joy. That was what this night represented, not just the birth of a Saviour, but the birth of hope. The promise that no matter how dark the night, the light would always come. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Saviour, which is Christ the Lord. Marcus finished the reading and closed the Bible. The room was quiet, filled with the peace that only this night could bring. Merry Christmas, everyone, he said softly. Merry Christmas, they responded, their voices a gentle chorus. The family began to disperse, some heading to bed, others staying up to enjoy the quiet of the late hour. Marcus found himself alone in the living room, looking at the tree with its generations of ornaments, each one telling a story. He reached out and touched the ornament with his name on it. Such a small thing, but it represented so much. Acceptance, belonging, love. What are you thinking about? Sarah appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. Just remembering, he said. Everything we've been through, everything we've built. It's been quite a journey. It has. He turned to look at her, this woman who had chosen him, who had fought for him, who had never given up on the dream of a united family. Thank you, Sarah, for believing in us, for giving your mother the push she needed, for loving me through all of it. I couldn't have done anything else. You're my person, Marcus. From the moment I met you, I knew. Knew what? That you were worth fighting for. That no matter what obstacles we faced, we would face them together. She reached up to touch his face, and look at us now. A family. A real family. Marcus pulled her close, holding her against his heart. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I love you, Sarah Johnson. I love you too, Marcus Johnson. They stood together in the quiet room, surrounded by the evidence of their life together. The photos on the mantel, showing the family through the years, the ornaments on the tree, each one a memory. The house itself, now theirs to fill with new memories, new traditions, new love. It had taken time and patience and more grace than Marcus sometimes thought he had. But standing here now, holding the woman he loved, surrounded by the family they had built together, he knew it had all been worth it. Every rejection, every slight, every moment of doubt, all of it had led to this moment, this peace, this joy. And as the clock ticked past midnight, officially marking the start of Christmas Day, Marcus made a silent promise. To honor Eleanor's memory, to love his family with everything he had, and to never ever give up on the people who mattered most, because that was what second chances were for. To right the wrongs of the past, to build something better for the future, to prove that love, in the end, would always win. The end. But it wasn't really the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be written day by day, choice by choice, by a family united by love and strengthened by everything they had overcome. As the years continued to pass, the house on Maple Street became a beacon of warmth and welcome in the community. Marcus and Sarah opened their doors to neighbors in need, hosted exchange students from around the world, and turned the annual Christmas celebration into an event that drew dozens of guests from every walk of life. Hope grew up to become a civil rights attorney, inspired by her father's quiet strength and her grandmother's journey of transformation. She married a man who reminded everyone of Marcus, patient and kind and unwavering in his devotion. Harold followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a doctor who specialized in underserved communities, traveling to places where medical care was scarce and hope even scarcer. David's twins grew into fine young men, both of them keeping the Williams-Johnson traditions alive, even as they forged their own paths. And the next generation after that continued the legacy, each one adding their own chapter to the family's story. And through it all, the lessons of Eleanor's transformation remained at the heart of everything. The understanding that people can change, that forgiveness is possible even after years of hurt, that the bonds of family, chosen and built with intention, can be stronger than any blood tie. Marcus lived to see his grandchildren and even his great-grandchildren. He remained active and engaged until the very end, teaching chess to young visitors, sharing stories of Eleanor's redemption, demonstrating through his every action what it means to love without condition. When he finally passed, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92, he was surrounded by 4 generations of family. The house on Maple Street was filled once again with mourning and celebration, sorrow and gratitude, the bittersweet recognition of a life well lived and a legacy that would endure. At his funeral, Hope delivered the eulogy, her voice steady despite her grief. "My father taught me that patience is not passive," she said. "It's an active choice made again and again in the face of every provocation and every disappointment. He taught me that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest strength. And he taught me that family is not just what you're born into, but what you choose to build." She looked out at the congregation, at the sea of faces from every background and circumstance, all united by their connection to this one extraordinary man. Dad didn't just belong to our family. He belonged to everyone who knew him. He made space in his heart for everyone, and he taught us to do the same. That is his legacy. That is what we will carry forward. After the service, as the family gathered one last time at the house on Maple Street, Sarah's great-granddaughter approached her with a question. Was Papa Marcus really turned away by his own family, like great-great-grandma Eleanor? Sarah smiled, her eyes still sharp despite her advanced age. "He was, sweetheart. For a long time, he wasn't welcome here. But he never gave up. He kept showing up, kept being kind, kept loving us even when we didn't deserve it." "But why? Why didn't he just leave?" Sarah considered the question, thinking of all the years, all the struggles, all the quiet victories that had brought them to this moment. "Because he knew that love is stronger than hate, that patience is stronger than prejudice, that the family you build can be even more precious than the family you're born into." She pulled her great-granddaughter close. "And because he loved your great-grandma Sarah more than anything else in the world." The little girl nodded, seeming to understand something beyond her years. Then she ran off to play with her cousins, leaving Sarah alone with her memories. She looked around the room, at the photos on the walls spanning generations. There was Harold and Eleanor on their wedding day. There was Marcus and Sarah at their own wedding, young and hopeful and unaware of the challenges ahead. There was Eleanor later in life, beaming as she held baby Hope for the first time. And there was the whole family, gathered together for Christmas, the traditions of the past blending seamlessly with the promises of the future. It had taken decades, but they had done it. They had built a family that transcended the barriers of race and generation, of prejudice and fear. A family united by love and strengthened by every obstacle they had overcome. And that was the greatest gift of all. Not the house or the wealth or the positions of influence, but the knowledge that no matter what challenges the future might bring, the family would face them together, united, unbreakable, forever. As the sun set over Maple Street, casting long shadows across the yard where so many memories had been made, Sarah whispered a prayer of thanks for Marcus, who had never given up, for Eleanor, who had found the courage to change, for all of them, past and present and future, who had chosen love. And somewhere, she was sure, Harold and Eleanor and Marcus were watching, smiling, proud of what their family had become. That was the story that would be passed down through the generations, the story of a family that almost wasn't, and the man who refused to give up on them, the story of second chances and transformed hearts and the enduring power of love. It was a story that would never truly end because it was being written still by every member of the family who carried its lessons forward. And as long as the house on Maple Street stood, as long as the ornaments hung on the tree each Christmas, as long as the bonds of family remained unbroken, the story would continue. Merry Christmas from the Williams-Johnson family, now and always. The following spring, the family planted a new tree in the backyard, beside the old oak that Harold had planted decades ago. It was a young tree, slender and hopeful, reaching toward the sky with all the optimism of new growth. They called it the Reconciliation Tree, and every year on the anniversary of Eleanor and Marcus's breakthrough conversation, the family gathered beneath its branches to remember. To remember the pain of the past, yes, but also the healing that followed. To remember that change is possible, even when it seems impossible. To remember that every ending is also a beginning. The children grew up climbing that tree, playing in its shade, carving their initials in its bark. And as the years passed, it grew tall and strong, its roots sinking deep into the earth that held so many memories. One day, decades in the future, a young woman would stand beneath that tree, looking up at its branches with wonder. She would know the story of how it came to be planted, the story of her ancestors' struggles and triumphs, and she would understand, in a way that transcended words, what it meant to be part of this family. She would know that love, in the end, had won, and that was all that mattered. In the years following Eleanor's transformation, she had started a tradition that continued long after her passing. Every Christmas morning, before the presents were opened or the breakfast was served, the family would gather in a circle and share one thing they were grateful for. It was a simple practice, but it anchored the celebration in something deeper than material gifts. It reminded everyone of what truly mattered, not the things they owned, but the people they loved. Marcus had continued this tradition faithfully, even as the family grew and the circle became larger and more diverse. And when he was gone, his children and grandchildren carried it forward, knowing it was one of the most precious gifts he had left them. On the 20th anniversary of Marcus's passing, the family gathered once more at the house on Maple Street. The circle was enormous now, spanning 4 generations, including members who had married in from other countries and cultures, each bringing their own traditions to blend with the ones that had been established long ago. Hope, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, stood at the center of the circle. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to share something my father used to say. He would tell us that the truest measure of a family is not how they treat each other in good times, but how they treat each other when things are hard, how they forgive, how they heal, how they grow. She looked around the circle, at the faces of the people she loved. We are here because of two people who didn't give up. Eleanor Williams, who found the courage to change, and Marcus Johnson, who had the patience to wait for her. They taught us that love is not a feeling, but a choice we make every day, in big ways and small. She paused, her eyes glistening. So today, as we continue this tradition they started, let's remember what we're really celebrating. Not just Christmas, not just family, but the possibility of transformation. The hope that no matter how broken things seem, they can be made whole again. One by one, the family members shared their gratitudes. Some were profound, some were silly, all were genuine. And when the circle was complete, they joined hands and stood in silence for a moment, connected by something greater than themselves. Then the moment passed, and the celebration began in earnest. The children tore into their presents with wild abandon. The adults laughed and reminisced and complained about getting older, and the house on Maple Street filled once again with the sound of family as it had for so many years, as it would for many years to come. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled warmly and the lights on the tree sparkled with color. And in the hearts of everyone gathered there, the lessons of Marcus and Eleanor lived on. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love never gives up. And sometimes, love wins. This is the truth that the Williams-Johnson family carried with them, through generations and across continents, through triumphs and tragedies, through all the years that stretched ahead like an unwritten story. It was the truth that Marcus had embodied every day of his life, the truth that Eleanor had discovered in her final years, the truth that every member of the family, past and present and future, was called to live. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.